Hi, this is Tim Santoni and welcome to Santoni Spotlight. Today, I'm joined by Barry Seaton, Seaton Law Group. Barry, thanks so much for joining the show. As we get started, maybe give the viewers a little context on your background, history, what it is you do in your practice today, and kind of how you got to this point.
Sure. My firm is, well, first of all, I'm an intellectual property and business attorney, and my firm, Seaton Law Group, represents individuals and companies in terms of protecting their copyrights and trademarks and doing the business transactions and contracts to help them, commercially use their intellectual property assets. And the way I got to where I am now is I graduated from USC Law School. I started out at a New York Wall Street firm in the Beverly Hills office doing corporate work. Eventually joined another firm that did I learned intellectual property and continued to do transactional and intellectual property work. And this firm represented a lot of major Hollywood studios. I eventually joined one of our clients, 20th Century Fox, as an in-house attorney. And from there, I was general counsel at a video game company for several years, doing entertainment-based video games. That company was eventually sold, and it led me to open Seaton Law Group in 2004, representing clients in entertainment and media.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what you do is directly tied to kind of the evolution in technology, gaming, and kind of the online distribution of media. So what are some of the things, the challenges that you've seen businesses come to you with recently as those things change in terms of the contracts, agreements, licensing, monetization of their IP, and protection kind of online?
Yeah, so copyright law has been evolving, and it's evolving to sort of reflect the electronic world that we live in today, where a lot of distribution is now done online. And so clients want to understand if they need additional protections or different protections for their intellectual property in this online world. And how the copyright laws and trademark laws of today work in the online world, and also in terms of protecting their intellectual property and making sure they don't infringe any other person's intellectual property, how that kind of works in the technical online age.
Gotcha. So as these businesses evolve, my guess is that you're kind of on the front lines in terms of the agreements, the contracts, and negotiating on the front end, but you also do the protection as well?
Yes. So often clients will first come to me for that's the very first stage, especially if it's a startup company or they have some new IP. They need to actually protect that, and that's advisable before they do enter into any kind of transactions with third parties. So the first step will be, talking about their IP, seeing how they're going to use it, the different options for protecting it, and registering either trademarks, which are brands, if those are important, or if it's some kind of original creative work, that's copyright. There's also trade secret protection available as well. And once that's secured, then the client is free to engage in commercial transactions because they know that that their property is protected.
Right. So in our world on the investigation side, oftentimes clients come to us and they don't have the protections, and they have in their head that, hey, even though I don't have the trademarks, these people are infringing upon, stealing our IP, and I want some sort of remedy. Maybe talk to the business owner in terms of the people that aren't sophisticated in that regard, in terms of what rights they would have versus what rights they don't have, and kind of why you would advise down that path. Because what you're saying is that we need to have some sort of remedy in order to enforce, and that's why you would do that first. But my guess is that some people come to you,
sure,
and then the reverse.
Sure, and that's a very good question because oftentimes I get calls that people are in some kind of dispute and they haven't necessarily protected their intellectual property, and they don't really realize what position they're in. Can be a vulnerable position, and so we kind of have to start out with where they are and make sure they have a clear understanding of that, which is often comes as a surprise, and then kind of go from there. But in terms of actually them coming to me to protect their intellectual property, what's important about that is there are certain rights which are called common law rights. I won't get too technical, which you have just by virtue of using your intellectual property, using your trademarks and copyrights, and you're entitled to certain rights. But what's very important to understand is that by registering those rights, the government has a mechanism that for a fairly reasonable cost in the trademark and especially in copyright world, and it can all be done online, you can actually register your rights, and registering those rights allows certain government legal defined benefits that you get that if you wouldn't necessarily have. And so you have rights, for instance, to sue in federal court, possibly recover your attorney's fees if someone's found to be infringing, and the amount of those fees are predetermined and they're per infringement. And there's a bunch of other benefits that you get by actually having a registration. So given the relative cost and given the benefits that you're entitled to, and if your IP is very valuable, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, sure. And also too, I assume when you're selling a company, the IP rights and the registrations probably have some sort of value. So maybe talk about, you worked in a business that that was in different industries that were companies that are bought and sold. So maybe talk to how IP can add value to a company, a registered IP in the areas where either that people are doing business or have distribution, in that sense.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, a lot of companies may not realize that their IP, that they have actually valuable IP. They may have it, and it's just not part of their daily business or the main focus of their business. So they haven't necessarily protected it or commercially exploited it, but there is valuable IP there. So I guess the first stage is talking with these companies and having them realize that there is value. If they're in a transition stage, they're thinking about selling their company or they're buying a company, making sure they understand what the valuable IP is. And then it's important to let them know that, yes, it is important to have that IP registered, because any buyer of a company is going to want to know that IP, if it's registered, it gives the certain rights I talked about, as well as the rights of presumption of exclusive rights to that IP, and that really increases the value of the IP to a potential buyer, and they're usually going to want to know and maybe ask for representations in their contracts for buying the company that the IP has been registered.
Right. Great point. So without disclosing who your clients are and cases you worked on, maybe give the viewers a sense of a recent case or transaction or matter you worked on that's relevant, that kind of sheds light on what it is you do in your area of expertise.
One reflective one would be that a client comes to me, and it's a startup company, and it hasn't registered any of their IP, and but it has created things and does have a valuable brand. So I talked to them about their IP and the options for registering it. We register their IP, and they in this case they have a contract that somebody has made them an offer to develop some kind of entertainment property, let's say, based on their IP, and they ask me to review the contracts. I'll review the contracts, or in some cases they'll ask me to draft the contracts, and then enter into negotiations with the third party for creating some kind of product or service based on their IP. I do a lot of work like that, and I get a lot of calls like that.
Oh. So it's almost like business deals on the IP side. You're kind of advising and making sure that they're protected and they're optimized for kind of commercial success.
Yeah, exactly. It's really important to have an IP attorney doing these types of contracts, because essentially in these contracts it's between two parties where one is the IP owner and another party is looking to either create, develop, distribute, sell some kind of product or service based on that IP. And they might be acquiring the IP, but more often they're actually going to be what's called licensing, temporarily using the IP for a certain period of time. And it's very important to clarify which rights are and who owns what rights and what rights each party has. The licensee want to know that it has the rights to use the IP to be able to do what it needs to do and get a return on its investment. The IP owner is going to want to make sure it retains its ownership rights and it has control over how its IP is used, and and for how long, and what it's going, what compensation it's going to receive, and how it's going to receive that compensation. So
yeah, that's a great point. It's a little bit more different than a standard distribution agreement or contract with the supplier.
Yeah,
that's great. So when you're not, working with these startups and entertainment companies and licensing the IP, how do you like to spend your free time when you're not working?
Well, I have a wife and 4 kids, all who are around college, either pre-college, college, or post-college, and we have a couple dogs and a couple cats. So home life keeps us pretty busy. But a lot of the kids are away at college now. My wife and I like to spend our time. We like to travel. We like to listen to live music and go to concerts, and we like to hike and take long walks and exercise together. So that's mostly what we do.
That's great. So what we'll do is we'll link up all of Barry's information in the show notes below. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. We'll make sure that we get back to you with those answers. Barry, thanks so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you spending some time.
Thank you.